Sup, guys? So, back with you yesterday. It was probably the most insane roller coaster that I've ever had on a day where I only had two plays, and both of them were complete roller coasters. It looked like it was going to be a sure 2-0 day. And then both teams that I was on, they both decided to throw the game away, basically stupidly. And then, caused me a lot of difficulty emotionally, mentally. And one of them actually wound up costing me the bet, and the other one did not. And they both cost me the money line. It was a crazy night. I mean, I had two plays that didn't start until 9 p.m. Eastern. I had one at 9 p.m. in college basketball and one at 10 p.m. in NBA. The Minnesota play was the one that still won. That was a crazy game. Minnesota, it was pretty much as I expected. They wound up keeping the game very low scoring. I think the game was in the 60s for both teams in regulation. The game was close the whole way. There were like 20-something lead changes in regulation alone. Neither team could get margin. Imagine, kid. And it looked like Minnesota was going to win. They had the lead at the end of regulation. And then it looked like Ohio State had hit a three, but they didn't. I don't know what the call was there, but I don't know, something didn't count about it. I had turned away, and then I turned it back on. I'm like, wait, what? I don't know what that was, but Ohio State wound up still having possession. I think they must have called a foul before it happened or something, because they still had possession. Then Ohio State got a 2-point bucket, basically a dunk. Minnesota stupidly fouled the guy while he dunked it, so gave them the opportunity to basically win the game right there with a free throw. Ohio State missed the free throw. It goes into overtime. I'm pretty sure that's what happened. It went into overtime. So Minnesota had a 2-point lead in the final seconds of regulation. I had them plus 5.5, and the line was down to 4.5 when the game went off, by the way. So I had a little bit of line value there. It was basically a wire-to-wire cover for Minnesota, I think, and the game was so close. Minnesota should have won multiple times. I mean, I had them on the money line. Then in overtime, Minnesota has the game put away, basically. They're up, I think they were up 2 points with not a lot of time left, with a few seconds left. They got the ball back. I believe they got intentionally fouled, and they only hit one of the two free throws because Minnesota was terrible at the free throw line. I believe that was their 11th free throw miss of the game or something like that at that point. So they missed one of two, only were up 3. They decide to intentionally foul with about 7 seconds left, which makes sense. Don't let Ohio State take a 3-pointer. Ohio State can hit threes. Okay, cool. I like that move. Good job on Minnesota's coaching, although apparently they're not well coached enough, as we find out shortly thereafter. Ohio State actually missed one of their free throws, so the game's still a 2-point game. Ohio State has to intentionally foul. Minnesota misses both free throws. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to mention, at the end of regulation, Minnesota, the guy who committed the foul at the end of regulation that never should have happened, Garcia, I think was the guy who committed the foul. He's like Minnesota's starting big man. He fouled out, so he's out of the game at that point. So they don't have that inside presence anymore. Anyway, we go back to, we're in overtime here. Minnesota has to intentionally foul, or excuse me, Ohio State has to intentionally foul, down 2 again. Minnesota misses both free throws. So they missed 3 of their last 4 in the first overtime period, which I think put them up to about 13 missed free throws in the game. And then what do? This was, I don't know if I've ever seen this before. I'm sure it's happened before, but it certainly hasn't happened in a bet of mine. So Minnesota's up 2 with 5 seconds left or whatever. So what do? Obviously, play defense. Try to stop Ohio State. No, somebody on Minnesota, I don't know who the guy was completely unaware of what the score was. He, I guess, thought they'd hit 1 or 2 of their free throws or something, paying no attention. He intentionally fouls Ohio State down 2 points, giving them 2 free throws. They hit both of them, and it goes into double overtime. I'm like, you have to be kidding me. You probably saw my rants on Twitter. I was losing my mind. I couldn't even watch the rest of it. And then Ohio State actually wound up getting up to a 5-point lead in overtime, down to 10 seconds left. They were up 5, and I'm like, this is over. Like, Minnesota's going to intentionally foul one more time, and Ohio State's going to cover this number. But they actually didn't. Minnesota actually scored to get the game a little bit closer. They actually somehow only wound up losing by 1. So I get away with the win there. I didn't get the money line cash. And if I had gotten the money line cash, I think I would have had a win last night. And meanwhile, the other game, I just stopped watching, or I stopped paying attention to the NBA game because I'm like, oh, this is over. And the Miami Heat completely dominating the Sacramento Kings, right? So that game was over. The Heat were up 17 in the middle of the third period. I'm like, okay, whatever. We're good. It's over. I think maybe even 19. I don't know what it was. Cool. Paid no attention to it. Then I go back and look later and it says my bet lost with Miami plus 3.5. I'm like, what? Which the line was all over the place. I think it was down to 2.5, and I think it was 4 at some point. So 3.5, not the worst number to have, but Miami dominated most of the game. So it's like, the game was over. Miami obviously was going to win that game outright, not just cover, but win outright. No, they blew the entire lead. I don't even know exactly how that happened. And not only did that one also go into overtime, but just like the Minnesota game, it went into double overtime. And Miami wound up losing the game by, I believe, 4 or maybe 5 and not covering. I think it was 5 and not covering any of the numbers that they had out there. Complete insanity, man. Total madness last night. I'm not happy about the results. The whole night, like, I'm sitting there and I'm like, I am the master. I am the king. I'm going to go 2-0 tonight. I'm going to be on an 8-1 run, which should be 9-0, including the day before that, where my only loss was the Houston Rockets by a half point. I'm like, yeah, I know everything. I can't lose. I'm unbeatable. And then all that shit happens. And I wound up with a slight loss yesterday. Let's talk about today. Because I'm ranting too much here. All right. College basketball we have today. We have a bunch of good games today, man. College basketball. St. John's and Xavier is up with a little bit of an early start time at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. St. John's, they are the better team, and they're up from Pick'em to 1.5 now as a road favorite. But it looks like the tickets, though they're evenly split, it looks like the cash is actually 93% on Xavier. I don't know about that. I don't know how to read this game, man, because I do think St. John's is the better of these two teams. They're coming off a win over Butler, which was a bounce back from a loss on the road to Creighton, which I don't think that's really a bad loss, going on the road and losing to Creighton. Turn around, come back home, get a win in a game that you should win, kind of can propel you forward. So the spot's not bad for St. John's, in my opinion, even though it is a road game. Xavier, I don't think it's that bad either. I mean, Xavier had a really rough stretch where they faced these 3 ranked teams in a row, Cincinnati, UConn, Marquette. Didn't win any of them, but they played well in every single one of them. Came back from that and beat Seton Hall, which they should. Seton Hall's pretty down this year. Good for them to bounce back. But then in their last game, they lost at Georgetown. Georgetown, I know their record looks really good right now, but I'm not convinced that Georgetown is really actually that good right now. I don't know that Georgetown is having this massive resurgence like this instantaneously. I think they're okay. So I don't know what to think about Xavier losing that. They could be in a bounce back spot as well coming off of that. Or you could say maybe that was actually a competitive game. It was a really difficult game. Xavier actually had to come back from way behind and then still wound up falling short. Very, very difficult to say, actually, if we think that they're going to be a little bit hungover, if that was actually a really big effort or not. So tough to say. Again, I think St. John's probably would be the way to look at this one because they are the team that I believe is the better team. The odds makers are telling you they are, as they're a favorite on the road. Miami, Ohio, and Ball State. We have a lot of MAC games, a lot of MACtion here tonight. It's Tuesday. It's Tuesday MACtion, basketball edition, not football edition. Miami, Ohio is the one that caught my eye the most. They would be the way I would lean in this game, even though they're quite obviously the better team over Ball State. Miami, Ohio's flipped from a 1.5 dog to a 1.5 favorite on the road here. I don't know if I necessarily want to jump in on a team that's obviously the better team, but it looks like the public is probably going to be joining me on that. But is the public really coming in and playing these MAC games and they have other good games on tap? Probably they do not. But I like Miami, Ohio in this one. Miami, Ohio is just kind of rolling along right now. They just beat Buffalo. Nothing to really write home about that. I think really that's just a momentum continuer. Now they are having to go on the road, and I know they haven't been good on the road. They're 1-3 on the road, but 2 of those losses were Michigan and Indiana. I mean, they're not going to win those really. Vermont is down this year, but still, I mean, Miami, Ohio, they're still a MAC team, but they're still better than Ball State. But the reason that I would look to Miami, Ohio in this one is because Ball State just went on the road and upset Kent State. That is a huge upset win of double-digit variety, 10.5-point underdog there. Kent State is one of the best teams in the MAC. Basically the opposite of what they are in football, where they're absolutely the worst team, maybe in all of FBS and not just the MAC, but they're one of the best teams in the MAC basketball conference. And Ball State was able to win this game as a big underdog. Ball State shot absolutely out of their minds in this game, 50% from three. Kent State was only 35.8 from the field and 26.5 from 3-point range. So, that was very much an outlier as far as that's concerned. Kent State won the turnover battle 23-10 and still lost the game. I mean, that's just insane. You're probably not going to see shooting percentages like that again. So again, Miami, Ohio would be the way that I would look in that game if I was going to play it, which I'm not, although I was close to actually wanting to do that. Talk about some of these ranked games. So I just figured I'd throw a little MACtion in there for you. And by the way, of course, because Kent State lost that game. I mean, Kent State would be the way I would look against Northern Illinois in this one as well, but they're laying 12.5 on the road. Could be a bounce back spot for Kent State, though. I mean, they are the much better team there, but I'm not going to lay double digits on the road in a MAC game, even if it is definitely a mismatch. All right, number 1, Tennessee is at number 8, Florida. One of the big matchups of the day on ESPN2, 7 p.m., SEC action here. This is an interesting one, man, because Florida's going to want to try to go up tempo in this game, and Tennessee doesn't really want to do that. I mean, at least I don't think. Where's Tennessee at here? Ken Baum's got them at not the number 1 slot right now. He's got them at 4. Tennessee plays very, very slow, and Florida plays very fast. So this is a big-time pacing mismatch. I know Florida's actually up to a favorite in this one. They're up from Pick'em to 2.5 with juice. They have 55% of tickets. It looks like, and only 54% of the cash on them. I don't know if that's really going to be the case. Like, I don't see public bettors actually coming in and being like, oh, Florida number 8 laying points against Tennessee number 1. I don't see the public doing that. So I don't think that those percentages are actually accurate. It seems like the anti-public way to play this would be to Florida, but I would very much hesitate to do so because Florida just played a really big, like, fast-paced, up-tempo game where they hung with Kentucky, had a nice early start in that game. Could have won that game against Kentucky really at multiple points. I think that was their second road game of the season. Also, it was their first loss of the season. When you have a first loss of your season, it can hang you over, man. You can potentially lose that game twice. So I don't want any part of Florida here, man, even though they are probably going to step it up because it's number 1 Tennessee coming into their building. But again, if you're rolling along like this, you're 13-0 to start the season or whatever, and you finally lose a game and it's to a good opponent and a tough game like that, it's tough to get back up off the mat again and play again right away. So Tennessee, on the other hand, yeah, they're still undefeated, and they had a much easier time of it blasting Arkansas on Saturday. Both of those games are on Saturday, so they had a lesser effort game there. So I think Tennessee comes into this game probably in better position. They have played 2 true road games already. It looks like Louisville and Illinois. Not easy opponents to beat, really, and they did beat both of them as well. Tennessee's certainly legit, even if they're not really actually the best team. I mean, I think it's a little bit wide open this year, and they're probably one of the best 5 or so teams in the nation. So I might actually, if the public is looking to take the points of Tennessee, I don't necessarily think that they're wrong in doing so. Kentucky is at Georgia. Let's just go right away. That's one of my plays. Georgia plus 2.5 is going to be a play for me. Speaking of this Kentucky team, again, it looks way too easy to lay the points with Kentucky here. It's basically like you're just picking the winner. Kentucky's up for 1.5 to 2.5 now. I don't know if you can get 3 on this, but 67% of the tickets are coming in on Kentucky. You know Kentucky's going to be public. Even though Georgia has a good record, the public's going to see this and see, wait a minute, Kentucky's number 6 in the country. And you're basically just giving me a line where it's pretty much pick the winner. Looks pretty easy, right? Take Kentucky. Well, 73% of the cash coming in on Georgia. And I think this is a sandwich spot for Kentucky. And I actually think Kentucky is overranked as well. I mean, if you look at Ken Baum's rankings, even though I think he still has Kentucky winning this game, but he has them down at 19th in the country. Kentucky doesn't play very good defense yet again. 90th in defense isn't very good, and he does have them at 42nd in tempo, whereas Georgia, I believe, is going to want to slow it down a bit more. He has Georgia at 241st in tempo, and Georgia with the better defense at 28th in defensive efficiency, although he has them at 71st in offensive efficiency. We know all this, though. We know Kentucky is the better offensive team here, the lesser defensive team. Kentucky wants to go really fast, but Georgia wants to slow the game way down. And Kentucky's coming off that huge battle against Florida, right? So they're coming off a game that was very fast-paced. Both teams got to the 100 mark in the game. Just a crazy game. Big win. I mean, Kentucky knocked Florida from their undefeated perch. That was a huge win. Now they have to go on the road to Georgia, where Kentucky, by the way, they only have one road game this year, and it was a loss at Clemson. That was one of their two losses on the season was their other road game. And their other loss was a pretty ugly loss to Ohio State. So, I mean, Kentucky, they do have some really good wins, too, against Duke and Gonzaga. So, I mean, Kentucky could beat anybody in the country on any given moment, any given night, really, at any given moment. But coming off that huge win over Florida, and a win that looks even better because both teams got into the 100s, and they got ranked Mississippi State up next, then Texas A&M, Alabama. They got 3 ranked SEC games up next. I don't care if Georgia has a nice-looking record here. I mean, I think we know Georgia is the lesser of these two teams, but I do think Georgia's flying a little bit under the radar. It's a road game off of a huge win. I think Kentucky might get caught in this one, man. And Kentucky, after playing that really fast-paced game, might get a little tired. Georgia's going to try to throw them into a half-court game and frustrate them and play a tempo that Kentucky doesn't want to play. So that means Georgia could maybe keep the game close as well as a home underdog, even though it's not by a whole lot. If you're taking the +2.5, you're kind of saying you're expecting them to win the game. Of course, throw a little bit of this on the money line. Georgia, I mean, I know they haven't exactly stepped up well. They have one nice win against St. John's, and they lost to Marquette and lost to Ole Miss. But, I mean, they played, I would say, at least respectably in those games. They did win on the road at Georgia Tech, too, which isn't that bad. And a win over Grand Canyon is actually not that bad either. But Georgia, they're coming off that loss to Ole Miss, which was one of their worst losses of the season, really, even though it was to a good ranked team. I mean, Georgia has not lost to any bad team this year, although, of course, they're playing a good team this time. But this is Kentucky coming into their building, man. You know Georgia's going to go all out for this game, and they're probably going to want to bounce back from a loss to Ole Miss like this. So I think this sets up a lot better for Georgia. I think it's a sandwich spot for Kentucky. Give me Georgia plus the points in that one. What else is going on here? This one is very bizarre, by the way. Arizona, unranked at West Virginia, who's ranked 21st in the country. I don't know if I've seen this. You very rarely see this, and yet I'm not playing this. But, I always talk about unranked home favorites against ranked road underdogs, right? Well, this is a scenario where you have an unranked road favorite against a ranked home opponent. You almost never see this. The odds makers are telling you Arizona is enough of the better team here over West Virginia that they're laying points on the road against them. And I agree, Arizona is most definitely the better of these two teams. Arizona has played a very difficult schedule so far. They're off to a bad start. And by the way, Arizona already lost to this West Virginia team earlier in the season in the battle for Atlantis, which, by the way, Arizona was a 6.5-point favorite on a neutral in that game. So that would equate to them being about 2.5 on the road. Pretty similar. The only hesitation that I have here is that this is a second straight road game for Arizona, and they just went in and knocked out ranked Cincinnati on the road, which I said I liked Arizona in that game too, because I thought the line was just begging you to take Cincinnati. It was only Cincinnati -2.5 in that one in Arizona. They're telling you Arizona's a little bit of the better team there too. Arizona got the win. They don't have anything up next, though, and I think they're probably going to still show up focused here. I mean, West Virginia was one of their losses. But, of course, as I said, Arizona, they've faced Wisconsin on the road, Duke, Oklahoma, UCLA, and they played pretty competitively in all these games. Arizona's not that bad, even though I know they lost Shino Ballo. They lost their big man that they had for a couple of years. He's over at Indiana now because I guess he wants to be a bigger man in a smaller pond, a bigger fish in a smaller pond. West Virginia, I faded them in their last game. I thought that was very much like a letdown spot at the very least after upsetting Kansas on the road. But Oklahoma State just really had a poor performance, and Oklahoma State tried to claw back to within that number. Couldn't do it. So West Virginia is just on a roll right now. So this would be a matter of, really, I just think that West Virginia looks better than they actually are. They're overrated. Of course, Ken Pom obviously has Arizona ranked significantly higher than West Virginia. I think he has Arizona at like 17 and West Virginia down in like the 30s or 40s. So Arizona is the better team. This line looks completely suspect. Arizona from 1.5 to 2.5 now, but Arizona does have 57% of the tickets on them, which I highly doubt that's going to be the case. 73% of the cash on West Virginia. To me, it seems like the public is only going to come in on West Virginia thinking, wait a minute, I get a ranked team at home getting points. It looks so easy. It looks too easy. So based on that, the lean would still be to Arizona in that one, but obviously I'm not going to play that game. We got a lot of big games today, man. This is crazy. Clemson and Louisville could be a good one too. Louisville's laying 4.5 at home in this one. This is an interesting one. Both of these teams are pretty good ACC teams that are unranked, but they've been playing pretty well. Clemson coming off a couple of easy wins against the California teams that had to go on the road and come into their place. Not an easy task for those California teams there, but now they're going out on the road, and they haven't been as good on the road, man. I mean, I know they won at Miami. Miami's very down this year, and I lost on that one. I had Miami on that one because Clemson was in a letdown coming off beating Kentucky. I really thought they would struggle against Miami. Their other road games, they didn't do well, losing at Boise, losing at South Carolina. That's not a very good loss. South Carolina, not great this year. So Clemson could have a little bit of difficulty here going on the road to Louisville at the KFC Yum Center. It's not going to be that easy. Louisville just beat me in their last game. I thought they were in a sandwich spot after beating North Carolina, which is always a huge win. And they had this game against Clemson up next, and they still went into Virginia and were able to beat Virginia easily. So they're just kind of continuing some momentum right now. I think maybe it sets up a little bit better for Louisville in this game. I keep closing all my tabs, of course. Come on, man. Reload for me, baby. All right. Louisville's up from 3 to 3.5, it looks like. So maybe some money has come in on their side. Probably I would agree with that, but let's just keep on rolling here. That Georgetown team I just talked about is at Marquette. Number 7, Marquette. Marquette's laying 12.5, though, in this one. So odds makers are telling you, even though Georgia has kind of a pretty record, Marquette is still the better team. I mean, Marquette's coming off beating Creighton, which is a nice win for them, but I don't know if they're going to be hung over after that or anything like that. A pretty good win for them, though, nonetheless. Georgetown maybe in the worst spot, actually, because they're coming off a nice win over Xavier, and that was a bigger win for them this season. So, I mean, Marquette may be the way to look in this game as well. They're up from 12 to 12.5, but they are public. 75% of the tickets. Public's only going to come in and play Marquette, and 55% of the cash on them, so a lot less of the cash. We will see. I mean, Utah's at Iowa State, but Iowa State's laying 18.5. Not really that interesting of a game there, really, even though it is a Big 12 matchup between two fairly decent teams. And Utah's coming off, I think, getting completely smacked by Texas Tech at home. So it might be good for them to just get the hell out of there after a couple of really ugly losses to Baylor and Texas Tech. Go on the road and maybe play better, but Iowa State is significantly better than Utah is. So I don't know. I mean, Iowa State's one of the better teams in the country, but Iowa State's coming off a nice win over Baylor, whereas you got Utah coming in off an embarrassing loss, and Iowa State has Texas Tech, Kentucky, West Virginia all up after this. So could be a spot to maybe look to the Utah side there. Iowa State's up from 17 to 17.5. It looks like 18, 60% of tickets, but 88% of the cash on Utah. So maybe some money is indeed coming in on Utah in that one. I don't know. And then Cincinnati is at that Baylor team. Both teams I just kind of mentioned briefly. Baylor laying 5.5 in that one. Let's see. Cincinnati's coming off that loss at home to Arizona, which, I mean, that's a tough game. Anytime you play Arizona, it's not an easy game. Baylor sitting at 5.5, really no movement on this yet. But Baylor, they're coming off fairly ugly loss at Iowa State. I know that's a game that you step up for and you try to play. So I could see this game going two ways. I could see them maybe being hung over because that like ended a win streak of theirs. And that's a game that you get up for, at least in your minds, emotionally, maybe. But I could see them also being angry because they lost by almost 20 and maybe wanting to bounce back. Or Cincinnati, I could see them that going either way too, because they could be mad that they lost at home to Arizona but also that's a tough game against Arizona. Now they're going out on the road, and they haven't exactly been great on the road. I mean, their last few games on the road, they lost at Villanova, at Kansas State. So, and I had Kansas State in that game because it was a situation where they were coming out of the break and whatever. Who knows? And Nebraska at Iowa is my other play. And I don't love the fact that I'm laying points with Iowa here, -3.5. The line shot up from an opener of 1. I never saw it at 1. But it looks like some real money came in on Iowa, and it's up to 3.5, 4 now. I don't know if the line might come back down a little bit. I believe KenPom only has this game at about 1. He does have Nebraska as the better team, but I just think this spot is really bad for Nebraska. So I'm going to risk it. I mean, if you want to play Iowa money line, I obviously would not disagree with that. You'd have to lay probably about in the 160s, -160s for that. I considered doing it that way, but I was like, it's a little bit pricey. I'll just lay the points and hope that it works out because the spot is just so bad for Nebraska. I played Nebraska in their last game against UCLA. I thought it was one of those spots where UCLA, a new team to the Big Ten, I thought they were going to be kind of thrown out of their element, going to an unfamiliar environment there. Nebraska, big win for them, man, over a ranked like college basketball powerhouse in UCLA. That's kind of a like legitimizing win for Nebraska, man. Huge win. So they're coming off of that. Now they have to go on the road to face Iowa. And up next, they got ranked Purdue, which I believe is going to be a Sunday game. So this looks like a sandwich spot to me as well. I think this is a bad spot for Nebraska for sure. Nebraska also has not been that great on the road, even though I know they went into Creighton and beat them. But that's a game in their home state. So that was a game. Creighton's also down. Like they were ranked 14th, but they're not probably not even a top 25 team this year. Good win nonetheless, going on the road and beating Creighton, but that's a familiar environment. Nebraska plays there every year. I mean, these Big Ten teams are also familiar environments, but their one road Big Ten game, they lost by 37 at Michigan State. So that doesn't exactly bode well. And their other Big Ten games that they played, I know they beat UCLA. That's a nice win. The other one that they played was Indiana, and I think Indiana's pretty down this year too. So Nebraska, I don't think has really stepped up that much in class either, and I don't trust them on the road here. Nebraska also plays a very slow pace. I think probably in 200s and pacing on KenPom, which, by the way, KenPom.com, I think great tool. It's worth paying for it. It's like 20-something bucks a year probably. You get the whole year, and you get all of his projections and stats and stuff. So I talk about him a lot. I recommend buying his stuff, man. I mean, he's got the best sets of college basketball power ratings that are out there. So, and I think he's probably very autistic like we are. So very autistic about basketball stats. But again, and Nebraska, as I was saying, they play really slow, probably in the 200 somethings tempo wise on KenPom. Iowa is like a top probably 20 or so tempo team in the entire nation. Iowa plays really fast. So Nebraska going on the road here, like I say, the home team has an easier time controlling the pace. Iowa could easily throw this game into high-scoring mode here, man. And Iowa, I mean, they've faced a more difficult schedule, man. They've faced Utah State. I mean, that's not that easy. Michigan only losing by 2 at Michigan. Michigan flying a bit under the radar. They're in the rankings. Now, Michigan is definitely good this year. Iowa State, very good as well. And that game was played to within 9. I think that was at Iowa. And then Iowa coming off probably their ugliest loss of the season against this Wisconsin team was also pretty good. Wisconsin seems to be getting into a lot of high scoring games, which you don't usually see. Wisconsin usually likes to slow it down. So this game was played at a tempo that Iowa likes, and Iowa got smacked. But I mean, look at this score, man. They lost by 31 points, and they gave up 116 points. I mean, you come off a game like that where you lose by 30-something points and you give up that many points in a college basketball game, that's embarrassing, man. So you're going to really want to bounce back from that and show up. And Iowa State themselves had scored in the 1-teens in their previous game against New Hampshire. I think this is absolutely a bounce back spot where Iowa is going to be focused in this game. It's a tempo collision where I like the home team being able to control the pace more. Nebraska's in a sandwich spot. You're obviously not getting the best number on this, but I think the side is very strong on Iowa. I'll risk it. I'll lay Iowa -3.5. And if you want to play Iowa in a different way, obviously, like I said, I don't disagree with money lining it either. Number 2, Auburn is at Texas. Auburn's laying 10.5 at Texas. Auburn's one of the best teams in the country. They're up from 9.5 to 10, 67% of the tickets, but 83% of cash on Texas. So maybe some money is coming in at Texas. Even though it looks like the public might be trying to take a shot on Texas, thinking, well, Texas is a big name as well and getting a lot of points, and they have a nice record. I don't know. Texas is coming off an ugly blowout loss at Texas A&M. So I don't know if that's going to be a type of loss that's going to hang them over or if they're going to do better here. But Texas, they have not stepped up well in class so far, man. I mean, they lost to Ohio State, UConn, and Texas A&M, and they haven't faced anybody else that's really good at all. So I don't trust Texas right now, man, even though the line is indicating that they're not really that bad. But Auburn's certainly the better team, and they're the more trustworthy team, although they are coming off a blowout win, I think, on Saturday. Well, they beat Missouri. I think this is just kind of like they just are going to continue having momentum here. Auburn, obviously the better team. They've stepped up in class way more, beating Houston, Iowa State, beating some of the best teams in the country, playing really competitively against Duke, beating Purdue, beating Ohio State in a massive blowout. Obviously, Auburn, much more battle-tested and the better team, so I would not want to take a shot with Texas there. And then the other one that caught my eye is Mississippi State at Vandy. Mississippi State is up from Pick'em to 2, but I mean, you look at this, and Mississippi State's 14th ranked in the country, and the line is almost just asking you to pick the winner here, although it looks like the money kind of has come in, driving that line up a little bit on Mississippi State. But Vandy, I think, is really flying under the radar right now. So I don't know if I'd want to do it. It almost looks like a trap. Like you get a one-loss Mississippi State team who is ranked 14th in the country. They're rolling right now, but they haven't really faced anybody that great yet. I mean, they did blow out Pitt, so that's a nice looking win there. And they beat Memphis, which may actually be the most difficult opponent they faced. Maybe Pitt was going on the road to Vandy. I know they won on the road at Memphis, but still, I mean, I don't know if I totally trust Mississippi State. I liked them in that spot against Memphis, by the way. And they do have Kentucky and Auburn up after this. So this could be a pretty major look ahead spot as well. They could get caught here with this Vandy team, even though they're 13-1. They're kind of still flying under the radar, man, even though I know they're not the better team here, but Vandy, they're kind of just rolling along too. They haven't exactly faced a difficult schedule either, though. Their one loss is to Drake, who is pretty good, but still a Missouri Valley team. And Vandy hasn't exactly stepped up in class either. So this is actually pretty hard to gauge. They're coming off a nice road win at LSU. I'll stay away. I mean, Mississippi State's obviously the better team here, but the spot doesn't look exactly that great. And it looks way too easy to take Mississippi State in that one. So that's kind of crazy as well. And then we do have Michigan and UCLA, weird ranked Big Ten matchup. Michigan 24 against UCLA number 22. UCLA laying 3.5. UCLA is coming off losing on the road at Nebraska and now having to return out to the Pacific Coast. So in a way, it is a bounce back spot for UCLA coming back home. It is an unfamiliar venue for Michigan, but I used that as part of my handicap against USC in their last game, and they won anyway. USC was within the number late in that game as well. USC battled and just didn't get it done. So Michigan kind of in a difficult spot still, even though they're already out on the Pacific Coast, and UCLA is having to fly back from the Midwest to the Pacific Coast. It is at least UCLA's home arena, which Michigan is not exactly used to playing in. And Michigan, playing 2 straight road games like this out on the Pacific Coast, not something they're exactly used to. It's new to them in the Big Ten there. So I would probably lean to UCLA in the bounce back spot there, up from 2.5 to 3.5 with juice. Money does look like it's coming in on that side. 60% of tickets, 95% of the cash on them. So interesting there. Let's move over to NHL, where I do have 2 plays over here too. Dallas is at the New York Rangers. Dallas is up from -140 to -163. It looks like some money has come in on Dallas. 67% of the tickets, only 65% of the cash. I mean, this is one of the bigger matchups, I guess, but the Rangers have just been playing such bad hockey that, they did just win against Chicago, so maybe that'll help give them a little bit of more confidence and momentum moving forward. Dallas is just kind of rolling right now and beating some inferior teams and now going out on the road with momentum, though. So, Dallas, obviously the better of these 2 teams right now. Difficult gauge on that one. Columbus and Pittsburgh is one of my plays. I'm going to take the Columbus BJs plus 125 on the money line. Pittsburgh down from -150 to -137, although it looks like they have 85% of the cash on them right now with 71% of tickets on Columbus. I don't understand that. I mean, I think this is a bad spot for Pittsburgh, and the line has moved down on them. So I don't believe that the money is actually coming in on Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is returning from a road trip. And I always say that tends to be a distracted spot when you're returning home from a road trip. Wasn't exactly a long road trip, but they've been on the road for about a week. So they still have to return home and they have to start getting stuff done at home. And what did they just do on the road trip? Yeah, they went 0-3. So I think the public sentiment almost, I think, would be, well, they're going to bounce back from that now that they're back at home. But I look at it completely differently. They just played Florida into a shootout on the road and then Carolina into overtime on the road. Two huge games, and they lost both of them, putting in huge efforts. And now they're returning home. They have the added distractions of having to get stuff done at home again. And they're playing a team that they're probably not going to be that focused on, Columbus, who isn't very good. And they got Edmonton up next in a couple of days. So I think it's a bad spot for Pittsburgh, sandwich spot and a return home spot. Columbus just beat St. Louis. I just think that that's going to be kind of just a momentum kind of a type of win there. It's going to help them move forward. And they have a couple of days off, so they actually have more rest as well. Just going out for this one game out to Pittsburgh, not really surrounded by anything. So I expect focus out of Columbus there. So give me the Blue Jackets in that one. Ottawa, Detroit. I like the Ottawa side in this one, but the market is indicating way against it. Ottawa down from -120 to -108. 75% of the tickets on them, 87% of the cash on Detroit, though. I don't fully understand this. I mean, Detroit, they're in a bad spot, in my opinion. They're at least in a letdown spot. They just beat Winnipeg. I mean, Winnipeg has gone on a little bit of a skid, but that's a huge win for Detroit, being the inferior team and taking out Winnipeg on the road. Now they're returning home. They do have an extra day off there, a couple of days off. But again, you get a couple of days off and you're returning home. It wasn't a long road trip, though, so maybe that'll mitigate the circumstances a little bit. But still, you're kind of getting settled back in at home. You're coming off a huge win over Winnipeg. So to me, it just looks like kind of a letdown spot. I don't know if it's the strongest spot, but I like Ottawa in this one slightly. Ottawa coming off that ugly loss to St. Louis, although they are finishing a fairly long road trip. I mean, it's not as long as it looks because they were on a road trip going into the Christmas break. Then after Christmas, they started a new road trip. It's still a fifth and final game of this road trip, but I think they might be at least motivated to try to get a win to finish this road trip on a decent note after going 1-3 on the road trip. And they're coming off an ugly 4-0 loss at St. Louis with a couple of days off. And I think those couple of days off could help give them some new momentum here, could help break that losing momentum. I mean, when you're losing, it might help actually to have a couple extra days off to finish this road trip here. It looks like a more positive spot to me for Ottawa. That would be the way I would lean there. Carolina's at Tampa. Tampa laying -106 with 69% of the cash on them, but 73% of the tickets on Carolina. So the public's coming in on Carolina, but the money looks like it may be disagreeing with that. Carolina came off that ugly loss in Minnesota after beating Florida, so they were maybe not the greatest spot there. Bounced back, beat Pittsburgh, but barely escaped beating them in overtime. Now they're going out on the road. It doesn't look like the worst spot to me for Carolina, so I'm not going to try to fade them here. But Tampa, I mean, they're on a skid right now, but they're returning home from the Pacific Coast. So, I don't love to play teams that are returning home from road trips, so I'm going to skip that. I mean, even though I know they lost every game on the road trip and 2 to bad teams, San Jose and Anaheim. So I think you might think that it would be a bounce back spot in that case, but when it's a road trip return spot, doesn't usually work that way. So I don't really think so. Toronto's at Philly. Philly just lost to Toronto, I believe, on the road. So now they could have quick revenge at home, and maybe Toronto will be looking ahead after already beating this Philadelphia team once. It's possible they just overlook them the next time and look forward to whoever the hell they're playing next. Who are they playing next? Let me see. Toronto's down from -150 to -131, by the way, and very public. 94% of tickets, 98% of the cash. They have Carolina next, so that could definitely be a look-ahead spot there. It's a much bigger game for them. So that would be the way I would look there. The other play that I have is St. Louis, the Blues. I'm on the Blue Jackets and the Blues. Hopefully I'm not singing the blues at the end of today. Hopefully it's not a blue day for me. Minnesota, I don't like the spot that they're in, man. Minnesota, they are coming off beating Carolina and Washington. They just went on the road, 2-game road trip. They beat Washington in a shootout and then shut out Carolina. I think they're in a letdown spot here, man. Returning home as well, though it wasn't a long road trip, but still they're returning home and they have a couple of days off. But I think having extra days off is not a good thing when you're rolling like this and you're coming off a huge shutout win over Carolina, 2 big wins in a row. You've won 3 games in a row. You want to keep playing, man. You don't want to stop playing because that could stop your momentum a little bit. And now you got a St. Louis team coming in who you might not totally pay attention to, who's had some struggles, and you got Colorado up next in 2 days. That is a much bigger game. Colorado with a pretty good record out west there. I think Minnesota could overlook St. Louis in the spot. St. Louis is coming off a pretty ugly loss, 6-4 to the BJs, the Blue Jackets there. They have a couple of days off after that as well, so they're fairly well rested as well. They do have travel here, but I think they're going to want to try to split the 2-game road trip here. They don't have anything upcoming that's more important than this game. So I expect St. Louis to show up in this one. And Minnesota's down from -160 to -136. So it looks like some heavy money is coming in on the St. Louis side. 93% of tickets, 100% of the cash is probably not accurate, but that's my other play, even though I do have somewhat of a lean to Ottawa, but the market and my situational read, I believe, are shaping up nicely, even though Pittsburgh does look like they have the cash now. I don't know what's up with that, but it looks like the money is going against both of the teams that I'm fading here and going towards both these hockey teams that I'm playing. So those are those 2 plays. And then I do lean to Calgary as well. And it does look like the market is agreeing with that one. Up from -130 to -134 on the road with 74% of the cash on them, but 93% of the tickets on Anaheim. Is that what we've come to, where the public actually wants to play Anaheim as a home underdog against Calgary, even though Calgary does still have the better record? I don't know about that, man. Anaheim, yeah, they've been playing a little bit better, but look at what they've done their last few games. They beat Edmonton, beat New Jersey, beat Winnipeg in overtime on the road, continued on the road the next day and played Edmonton again to within 1 goal. And that was a close game. They lost in the final minute and a half of that game. Also played pretty physical. If you look at the stats, they came home from that and they played a 3rd game in 4 days and still smashed Tampa Bay. I mean, you got to expect that Anaheim's going to not have a whole lot left in the tank after that, after 5 huge games in a row and winning 4 of them, which maybe is why the public is on them, because they're on this nice roll here. But this team isn't that good. I know Calgary's not that good either. At Calgary, they're getting to go out on the road after a couple of ugly home losses against Utah, although they were coming off beating Vancouver in that one. So maybe it was a little bit of a letdown, but I expected them to bounce back against Nashville, and they did not at all. They played horribly. Now they're going out on the road, so they get to kind of forget about it, go on the road, focus on hockey. So to me, looks like a pretty bad spot for Anaheim in that one to me. So that would be the way I would look in that one. And before I get out of here, we'll go to the NBA real quick. I don't have any plays in the NBA. I know, sorry to disappoint you folks. Not a lot of intriguing matchups here, to be honest. The Suns laying 5 on the road, now down to 4.5. 56% of the cash on them, but 74% of tickets on the Charlotte Hornets. I'm not sure that I believe that that's actually true. I don't see why the public would be coming in on the Charlotte Hornets, but I don't like the spot for Phoenix because they just pulled off a nice road upset against the Philadelphia 76ers, and they do have Atlanta up next, so they may not totally pay attention to Charlotte, and they're on a back-to-back and a 3rd game in 4 days, all in different cities, so it is a difficult spot for Phoenix. Charlotte, though, they just played Cleveland fairly competitively on the road, and they're returning home from that, only losing by 10, so I don't really want any part of Charlotte in that type of spot either, though, so I'll stay away from it. Lakers are at the Mavs, and they're up from 4.5 to 6.5. So this is just crazy what the line is doing now with the Mavs without Luka. 81% of the cash on the Lakers, 72% of the tickets, though, on the Mavs. Public seemingly thinking this is too heavy of a line on the Lakers, but Mavs are very injured right now. I mean, Kyrie Irving has had injury issues too. I don't know if he's playing in this game. He's out as well, it looks like. So, I mean, the Mavs are without their 2 best players. So it's like, what do you want out of them? I don't know what to expect out of this. I don't want to touch this game, obviously. Mavs on a pretty bad losing streak. Of course, they're a very depleted team. The Lakers did just cover and beat me, and they're having to go from Houston to Dallas. So to me, it doesn't look like the easiest spot for the Lakers, really having to play both of these Texas teams on the road like this. And I don't know what they have up next, but I don't know, man. They've got Charlotte, not a big game up next, but yeah, I don't know. They're at least coming off a difficult game against Houston, having to play another Texas team on the road. Minnesota, this is kind of an intriguing one where it looks like maybe a spot to actually play the Pelicans. Minnesota up from 5 to 5.5, 94% of tickets and only 75% of the cash. I mean, almost looks too easy to lay the points with Minnesota, even though I know the record doesn't look that good. They're a pretty good team, but they're coming off beating the LA Clippers, and they do have a much bigger game up next against Orlando, and they're on a back-to-back and playing a third game in 4 days, all in different cities, and a fourth game in 6 days, zigzagging all over the place. At home against the Celtics, then out to Detroit, back home, beat the Clippers yesterday. Now they get New Orleans, and then Orlando up next, and Orlando might be starting to get some of their guys back there. So that is a bigger game than facing New Orleans. I mean, the Pelicans have been just massively injured, but the Pelicans have won 2 in a row, both against Washington, though. Washington, an even worse team than the Pelicans. Pelicans, I don't even know what their injury status is, man. Zion looks like he might actually come back, or he might be back. And I don't know if he has been back yet. I don't know, because that seems to be kind of being factored into the line here. So Zion could be coming back in this game. Looks like he might. That would be a big piece for them. Brandon Ingram is still out for a couple of days. Murray looks like he's hurt, but he might play. Trey Murphy is going to miss this game. Trey Murphy the third. So I don't want to try to play New Orleans with this weird injury situation where you don't even know who's going to play for them, but it does look like the line is very kind of suspect there with a New Orleans team with a horrific record, getting not that many points at home. Almost looks too easy to lay the points with Minnesota on a spot like this. But if Zion is coming back and he's such a huge piece, it would be like a reverse injured player spot where they have to work him back in. It's going to get factored into the line probably too much, and Zion might not be like ready to go right away either. So I would really hesitate there. And then you do have my Boston Celtics at Denver. Difficult matchup for the Celtics, man. Denver's played pretty well against them recently. Celtics up from 3.5 to 5.5 with juice, though. So the money looks like it has come in on the Celtics, along with the public. 93% of the tickets, 96% of the cash. So the money looks like it's coming in on the Celtics. They're in the middle of a difficult road trip, but they did beat Minnesota and Houston. Then they lost to OKC. Very difficult matchup against OKC. So either they could be in a bounce back spot coming off of that, or it could be another difficult spot off a tough game against Oklahoma City. And now they're having to go out into elevation. I'm not going to try to play the Celtics, obviously, in this one. I mean, I obviously know the Celtics as well, and this is a difficult spot. Denver probably in an easier spot, even though they're coming off an overtime game. They've had multiple days off to come back from that one game in San Antonio where they barely got by after losing to San Antonio the previous game. I think they're going to be ready for this. They don't really have this game surrounded by anything, so the spot does, to me, set up better for Denver. And then you got Golden State laying 9.5 against Miami, because Miami is still without Butler, and Miami played yesterday and played it to double overtime and didn't even cover for me. Thanks a lot, Miami. Completely blowing it late. Warriors up from 6.5 to 9 with 56% of the cash on them. 85% of tickets on the Heat. Public thinking this line is too big, but to me, I'm not even sure that it is. I mean, Miami could be very much out of steam after that game last night. Golden State just also lost to Sacramento by 30 points. That same Sacramento team that Miami just took into double OT. So the public's probably going to look at that because they both just played the same opponent and think, well, wait a minute. Golden State lost by 30 at home to Sacramento. Miami just went on the road to Sacramento and should have beaten them. And you're giving me 9 with Miami. Looks almost too easy, but I think it's a bounce back spot for Golden State. That's the way I would look at it. That's going to do it for me, man. That's all I got for you today. No football today. We'll be back with some football later this week. My plays one more time. Georgia in college basketball plus 2.5. Iowa minus 3.5. Hockey, Columbus Blue Jackets money line plus 125. And another money line underdog in hockey, St. Louis Blues plus 124. That's going to do it for me. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow me on Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it. Follow the Tower Gang podcast, Tower Gang. You can subscribe to the Patreon as well, patreon.com/TowerGang, and you get live pre-show, post-show, bonus content, baby. You'll get us tomorrow night. We're on every Wednesday, 9-11 p.m. to make you laugh, baby. In these hard times, come laugh with us and get hard with us on Tower Gang. That's going to do it for me, man. Let's have a good one. Let's get some wins today, and peace out. Thanks for hanging out, guys.